This message number 13 in the series, The Return of Christ and Current Events. And today I want to talk a little bit about the financial system, which is a very, very big deal in current events today. And so I want to give a little bit of an overview about this. And of course, as always, I encourage you to research yourself and to verify. But I'm going to present things today that I believe to be true, although, like I said, it's always good to verify things. And but this is a very important subject in current events today, and even having to do with the return of Christ. And so we find ourselves today in March 25th of 2020, and a very interesting time indeed. We're in the middle of the Chinese coronavirus here in the States, and seems like things are heating up as far as the spread of this virus. And presently we are in a situation where the government authorities have asked us to not go away as much and to be in smaller groups, no groups larger than 10 and all of that. So we're in the middle of that right now. Now, however, what I want to point out today is that there's a whole lot more going on than the virus. And in a further message and a later message, maybe even the next one, I want to talk a bit about this great event of the coronavirus and again give a perspective of it. Now, in all of these things that we're speaking of here in these current event messages, as you probably know, there's many varying opinions and all of that, and there's a lot of false information. There's a lot of things that are not true. So we want to just I want to give you a few points today. It's a very brief overlook, very limited overlook, but I think maybe enough to give us a little bit of a picture of the reality of the financial system. Now, it's important for us to realize that right now we are going through a time of shaking. Okay, with this virus, we're going through a time of shaking, and in the financial things, we're going through a time of shaking right now. As I speak, a lot of businesses are closed, even by order of the government. A lot of businesses. It varies from state to state. Now, out where I live, the restrictions are not as great as they are in some of the more populated areas. But and so people, there's two things here. There's faith and there's fear. Fear leads to panic, and that's what we find, unfortunately, with so many, is that when it comes to both the virus and the financial system and the financial future, there's so much fear and panic being spread, and a lot of it by the mainstream media, much of it, not all of it, but there's so much panic being spread by them, and highly unfortunate. So you have to be very careful what you listen to. Now, I know a lot of you probably won't listen to this till maybe it's over with, but at least even then I think it'd be valuable to look back and in sometimes hindsight you can learn a lot. Well, anyway, we're in the middle of it right now, and there's a lot of talk going on. Oh, there's going to be a great recession, or maybe even a depression. There is so much bad news out there right now. But so we want to look at the background of some things here, and remembering first of all here a verse from 2 Timothy 1:7, which is so on target for the day that we live in. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear. Right now, I see the spirit of fear moving across the land, moving across the world, trying to bring people into despair. This spirit of fear trying to drive the worst narrative and trying to discourage people, get people into a place of desperation and then just finally giving up. And that's not necessary. In fact, that's not from God. God did not give us the spirit of fear. But what did He give us? But He gave us the spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. And so this is what God gives. And it's you don't really recognize the need for that so much when everything is going smoothly, the economy is going well, there's not much sickness around and all of that. Life is easy and flows along. How much faith do you need then, really? We do, but we don't think about it as much at a time like that. But this is a day when, if a person is prone to fear, and if his faith and trust in God is not secure, it's going to show up. That's what we mean by a shaking. We're going through a great shaking right now. A shaking in people's faith, a shaking in what they really believe, a shaking to the point where people can see whether they have a real and true and living faith in God or whether they do not. And that's so important. Now, I want to just tell us a little bit today about some background of the financial system that this country is in right now. Much of the world is in this same system. You see, many years ago, decades and decades ago, this country was originally it started out as the people of the country were in charge of the financial systems and banks and so on. And then it was lost when a Federal Reserve system and central bank system somehow got the control. Well then, as years went on, I know this is very abbreviated, but I invite you to search it out if you have interest in these things. There came a man along who became president. His name was Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson was very, very hard against the Federal Reserve, the central bank system, because he realized that if a separate entity other than what is controlled by the people, and that's what the central bank, Federal Reserve, and all of that is, it's not controlled by the people of the nation, it's controlled by a separate group of bankers and elite people who control the finances of that nation, and they have way too much power, and it's way too unaccountable to the people. And so he saw the great danger in this, and he set this nation free again from the clutches of this Federal Reserve central bank system and brought it back to the people. That's what he did. Now, I find it interesting that along the way, you see, we forget history so often. And that at times gets us into trouble. We need to not forget history. We need to learn the lessons that history has taught us. But along the way, in about 1913, which is over 100 years ago now, that it came up again, and is quite a story. And once again, the president in the day, he signed us off, and the government at that point again turned us over to a Federal Reserve central bank system, a financial system. And so we were, in a way, in my terms, sold out in 1913 in this way. There's a lot more detail, a lot more things that you could that played into this thing. There's quite some story, and but anyway, just for our purposes today, I want to keep it general and short. But in 1913, we were again came under a Federal Reserve central bank system, and that turned out to be the fiat money system. Now, along the way, in the 70s then, the way I understand it, this as a nation and as a money system went off of the gold standard. We used to be backed by gold, precious metals. Our financial system had backing. And in the 70s, I believe it was, we came off of that. Now, what does that mean? Well, basically, according to the way I understand it, is that when we came off of that system, what was our money system based on, or the money system we were operating in, what was it based on? Well, it had to do with oil, but it was basically a debt-based system. And this is, the sad thing about this, I'm just going to say it the way I see it, which is sometimes a little bit maybe hard for people to quite stomach, but basically, according to what I can find, that the top people who are running the financial system, who are not government people, they are not actually subject to any particular nation, but the very, very top people are in fact Luciferic Satanists, and they have an agenda. They have a worldwide agenda, and much of the world is in one way or other connected with this same system. And so they have been manipulating the world way too much through, you see, like it's been said, if you control somebody's money, you can control their lives. And that's way too true. There's too much truth in that. Yes, there are people on the board of this organization that are appointed by our elected leaders, and yet the ultimate control has not been by the people and for the people, which is the way our government was supposed to be. Okay, so we got sold out to this thing in 1913. In the 70s, we left the gold standard, and today, the way I understand it, our money is not really backed by anything. It's a debt-based system controlled by a private entity that has an agenda. What is that agenda? Globalism, one world government. That's the agenda. And systems like this, if you look back over the decades, the way I understand it, systems like this last only 40 or 50 years, and then that financial system will implode. So what happens then? At that point, a crisis is planned, yes, planned, and a major war breaks out or disaster comes on the nations of the world, and there's a lot of repossessions of property and all of that, and of course, you know, where there's repossessions, it goes back to the banks where the loans came from, and where did the banks get their money. It all goes back to the guys on top, and so there's a big disaster, and the people lose out big time. The people lose their possessions, you know, and you know, we had these things happen in our history. So the disaster then resets everything, and they kind of like start over with the banking systems having repossessed a lot of the wealth. The people lose their wealth, and the central bank system, it takes possession of that, so they kind of like start over. So now, I find it interesting that our current president, he has on his wall in the Oval Office, he has a picture of a person, a past president. And that past president is Andrew Jackson. Well, now, why would our current president put a picture of President Andrew Jackson on his wall? Well, it is my belief and conviction, after having looked into these things in a measure, that he has in mind and is in the process today of delivering us out of the tyranny and clutches of the Federal Reserve and the central banks. I believe that not only does he have in mind to do that, but he is in the process, a very advanced stage even today, of bringing us out of that and bringing the monetary system back to the control of the people of the nation, where they can rightly, hopefully again, elect leaders that will control things right. And so I believe that's what's happening exactly today. Now, we saw for years under the other system, you see a lot of politicians were controlled by that entity. And notice what happened in the past decades. It's important to notice this, because if you realize a little bit what's happening today, if you realize a little bit the background and what is actually in progress, you won't panic. Okay, it's a lot of panic. Oh, recession. Oh, depression. Oh, we're gonna die and we're gonna lose everything, and all of this panic that's going on. Well, if you have a little bit of understanding, you see, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, the scripture says. So it's good to understand a few things about this. So if you understand this a little bit, you won't panic, even on the natural level, because there's something being put in place. Now, as I started to say, over the decades, manufacturing has been removed from this country, and this was by design. In fact, there were 60,000 factories left this country to go to China, to go to Mexico, to go to other countries. And why was that? It was because of very strong regulations that were imposed upon them, as well as high taxes. They could not survive in this country because of regulations and taxes. Okay, so what has happened now? In the last 3 years, with our present president at the helm, he has been bringing back the manufacturing big time. How is he doing that? He's doing it by lowering taxes and reducing regulations. That's bringing the factories back. So why is he doing that? To provide jobs for the people. And what does that do in turn then? It creates an economy that can be self-sufficient and doesn't need the interference and the domination of the Federal Reserve and the central bank. And so thousands of companies left, and jobs were lost as a result. And the people, more and more under the previous administration, the people were becoming more and more dependent on the government just to survive. Very, very sad. It's not the way our country was founded. We're not founded as a welfare nation. But you see, the more people you get into welfare, the better you can control them. And that was the whole thing. I mean, it's true. It's true. It's the way it is. Jobs were lost. People were becoming dependent on the government. People were drowning in debt. That's how it was. Now, you see, this current president is turning all of this around. And, if you've been paying attention at all, the joblessness numbers were way down. The economy was really moving up, and there was a lot of hope, and people were moving away from government support, and moving away from handouts, which is very necessary. And so that's where we were until this pandemic hit the world, and more on that another time. But so we see what was happening, all right? So what was the end game in all of this? Why was it arranged deliberately to remove the factories and get people dependent and all that? What was the end game in this? It was to bring the most powerful nation on earth down to the third world status. In other words, if you bring it down, you have to bring it down so that and at the same time, and this was happening, the freedoms were being stripped from the people of this nation. So what do you have? You have the dependency deliberately planned to turn to the government, and then you have the stripping of personal freedoms. And the plan was to bring us as a nation down to a third world level so that we can be controlled, and that the globalist agenda, which very clearly is the Antichrist agenda, to impose that upon us as a nation, and therefore strip freedom not only from us but from the world, so that we can be dominated by those who have set themselves up, who are Luciferians and who are in the Antichrist system. So the aim was to bring us down so that we could be dominated by globalists, one world government, Antichrist, and ultimately the rule of Satan. Now, another important thing to note here is, as a historical fact, when we were returned back again to a Federal Reserve system, central bank system that was not controlled by the people, then also the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, that system was established to collect the money from the people to pay the interest on the loans that the government was making. See, now the government is for the most part, operating on borrowed money. And so the national debt is tremendous. It's way out of sight. 20-some trillion dollars, some say a whole lot more than that. So you see, now the only reason that there needed to be an IRS is because of the Federal Reserve central bank system. So if that would go away, I think the IRS also could be removed. Personal view of it, okay. Some may disagree with that, but it's my personal view of it. And if you really look into it, now this is kind of a side note here, but a lot of the money that is collected from you and me in taxes, especially by this particular entity, goes for very, very corrupt purposes. It does. It's a fact. It goes for very corrupt purposes. A lot of times the money is sent out to a nation, it's laundered, and it comes back, and at least part of it fills the pockets of the politicians who are paid off to make these corrupt decisions. That's a fact. It's if you don't have to look far to find the facts. There's a lot of truth being brought out, and a lot of you take the just things that are coming out right now. I'll mention one country, the country of Ukraine. That's being proved. You can go online and find investigators that lay out, they have the facts, they have court documents, they have interviews with people from that country that lay out exactly the corruption that is going on using your and my money that we were forced to give for so-called taxes. Okay, so anyway, it's just a few facts, and I'm not saying we should rebel against the system. It's not what I'm saying at all. The Lord had very clear teaching. There's a clear teaching in the New Testament about us paying taxes. So that's there, and we do that. However, we need to know the truth, because if we don't know the truth, we're going to speak things that we shouldn't, and we're going to run down the wrong side here. Okay, so as it goes, and as it is true, the world is being financed by rich overlords in maybe not every country, but a lot of them. Okay, so the scripture would teach us that the borrower is servant to the lender, and personally, I believe that in being brought into this system, We were sold into slavery because of it. It's just, check it out. But that's how I see it. So it seems then clear that a few families run the finances of the world. Very, very dangerous. And if you run the finances, naturally speaking, if you run the finances of a nation or of the world, you can control most of what goes on. Now, that's why it's important for God's people to rise up and pray for truth, for justice, for righteousness upon the earth. Like Jesus taught us to pray, that thy kingdom come and thy will be done on earth as it is being done in heaven. So the IRS creates the supply money for the central bank, the Federal Reserve. That's a fact. Okay, so now just a few more points here. Now I want to talk a little bit about the new system that is being created by first of all, our president that's in office right now. So he's establishing a new system right now. After looking at this for a year and a half or so, I'm convinced personally that the one in office right now is creating a new financial system with ultimately freeing us and delivering us from the Federal Reserve, the central bank system, the fiat system, the debt-based system. And why do I believe that? Let me just give you a few facts here. He's bringing back manufacturing, and he's lowering taxes and reducing regulations to do it. Okay? And new trade deals are being negotiated. You see, a lot of the trade deals were rigged to bring down this country. Really, it was. Let me give you one example. The trade deals in China, every year it cost this nation $400 to $600 billion dollars. $400 to $600 billion just to do trade with China. And so he's reversed that. Okay, why was it set up that way? It's so extremely foolish. Why was it set up that way? It all plays into the truth that it was to bring this country down, to defeat us so that we would have no power and ultimately be controlled by the globalists. Okay, so he's bringing back manufacturing as we speak here, and he made new trade deals. He's working on that. This is all part of a new system that he's establishing. And so he's switching us from the old system to the new. This switch, I believe, we're in the progress of it. And I think as we're here today, March 25 to 2020, as I look at things, you see there's a lot of talk about, the world is going into a recession and the whole system is falling down. You know what? I think that is true, to the extent that it is referring to the old system. It's true, the old system is coming down. But what I want to bring out today that should give us courage and hope is that we're not depending on, and we're not going to depend on that old system that is falling down. It's true, that system is falling down. But we have a new system established by our current president that is running alongside the old, and the new one is taking over. And so that's why I believe today, now the next months will prove this one way or the other, but I don't believe that we're going to fall into some very deep pit of depression and recession. We're facing ripples right now. We're being affected, and we're going to be affected till things are fully in control again. But I believe, and what I'm seeing is that a new system is rising up, is being established. He's been working on this. I'm saying our president today, he's been working on this ever since he's in office, and it's running alongside the old, and the new is going to cancel the old. I believe that personally. check it out for yourself. But so anyway, new trade deals. And there's a switch from the old to the new. The new will likely, the new system, personally, I expect it's going to be backed by precious metals, gold, maybe even platinum, I don't know what all. But I believe it's going to be a sound system that's actually backed by something again. So the old system is imploding, the new is coming along. Now in conclusion here, I just want to say, we can be part of the panic, doom and gloom, and it's all, this is it. Or we can look at the facts, and if you really know what's going on, if you've been paying attention, then I think you will understand that we can have faith, we can have trust by seeing the facts. First of all, with the Lord, our faith is established in Him, and our hope is not in this world. It's in the life to come. It's in what Jesus did for us. However, it is also necessary for us to see that there is a new reality in, you see, God Himself raised up the person who is in office today for such a time as this. And I believe that what we're seeing is the coming forth of something new, and meaning then that the Lord very possibly is giving us time to bring more people to the Lord, and that we can look ahead, we can rejoice, and regardless of how things turn out, we need to do that. But yet at the same time, I believe there is, naturally speaking also, there is hope, and there is a new system being created, and that is going to be a lot better, a lot more sound than what we're in. So keep these things in mind. Let's have faith. Let's look up. Let's believe.